Samuel Canu took off his respirator and allowed himself a few moments to enjoy deep breaths of the clean, air-conditioned air of the lobby. He used his handkerchief to brush the yellowish fog droplets out of his hair and looked outside through the glass door. The fog was so thick, he couldn't see his car at the curb. With the industrial complex of the entire planet dedicated to the war effort, no one bothered to be green anymore. This meeting was crucial, so Canu braved the traffic and the polluted air of the capital. Both seemed to be getting worse every time. And he counted his blessings for not having to make such trips frequently. Almost immediately, an adjutant greeted him. "They'll see you now, Mr. Canu." Two men and a woman sat behind a long desk in a very small meeting room. They nodded to Canu when he walked in, but didn't offer him a seat. Now, there would be no point. The room was devoid of any additional furniture. He stood in front of them, like a man on trial. "Proposal 2746B, the younger man spoke into a recording device. He stared up at Canu. "What have you got for us, Professor?" Canu began to unfasten the clasps of his briefcase, but the tall woman on the right shook her head. "No documentation at this stage. Summarize your proposal, please." "Biological warfare," said Canu. The three department defense officials focused on him sharply, as though they were seeing him for the first time. "We're stretched thin in our conflict against the Hotchk. Most of our planetary resources are dedicated to the war, and we're still barely holding our own. We kill them, they kill us. Nothing really changes." The three made no comment. The older man, wearing the stripes of a colonel, took out a cigarette and lit it. "We need to find subtle ways to shift the balance of power, change the circumstances on the Hotchk homeworld in ways that are both effective and not resource-intensive for our side." "What do you propose specifically? Germs? We're already working that angle, of course." "Of course. I propose a more subtle approach. Something the Hotchk won't even perceive as a threat. Not right away, anyway. Like a lobster that doesn't realize it's being slowly boiled." "What approach?" The colonel took a puff of his cigarette. "Invasive species. Introduce just the right plant, insect, or animal to the environment where they don't belong. It can result in billions worth of damage. Perhaps even irreparably alter the Hotchk ecosystem. Well, if we're lucky." The three officials stared at him. "You come here to talk about seeding plants?" "There are many examples in our own history," Canu spoke quickly, afraid he was losing them. He was never good at the elevator pitch. "The golden apple snail devastated the rice fields of Asia. Cane toads screwed up the Australian ecosystem. Even the humble earthworm played a huge role in the European colonization of North America." The three officials exchanged glances. "Where'd they find this guy?" "One of his former students works at the White House. He convinced the higher-ups to have us hear him out." Canu's heart sunk. They were discussing him as though he wasn't even in the room. "You want to fight the Hotchk with toads, Professor Canu? They're fluorine breathers. No Earth species would survive there, let alone thrive well enough to screw up their planet. I know that, of course. What I propose is to study their ecosystem. Look for the native animals and plants that we can relocate in order to cause the most damage. It's cheap, and it can be incredibly effective. "That's a mere annoyance," said the younger official. "We can do worse with a single bombing run." "There's more." Canu wiped the sweat from his forehead. "We can genetically engineer bacteria to convert fluorine into oxygen, poison them, while slowly terraforming their whole world." "Thank you for your time, Professor, but we aren't interested. Even if your ideas were viable, it would take decades for them to work. The war's been going on for nearly 10 years now. One way or another, it will end before any sort of ecological imbalance can be achieved. All I need is access to the information you already have. We don't require a grant or anything else. My university will work on this on our own dime." But they wouldn't listen. Less than 5 minutes later, Canu was outside, navigating the streets to find his car in the dense fog. Even through the respirator, he could detect the faint scent of fluorine.